Julia Wood with Hexy Love. I've developed this new Hexy Love curved hexagon ruler coming out January 1st, 2016, and I've been working a lot with that on these videos. I'm also working with my new Hexy Love wash away papers for English paper piecing. Today what I'm going to show you is how to hand stitch and machine stitch the curved hexagons together. Stay with me, you'll enjoy it. Let's learn how to stitch a curved hexie together using hand stitching. Now you may remember I cut these using my curved hexie ruler from Hexy Love, and I used a glue basting to hold it to water-soluble paper. This is a little different than stitching straight edges together, but it's still easy to do by hand. The first thing I do is line it up so that everything is straight. And I have the right sides up here. I'm going to take a little bit of tape and just hold that front side together. You can put a few pieces on if that would make you feel better. Let's put another one on this end. Now I'm going to turn that upside down. I'm going to fold that tape to get it out of my way. Now that's going to hold it together while we sew. I've threaded my needle with a dark thread so that hopefully you can see what I'm doing. To stitch these together, I'm going to place them flat on my surface. It's a lot easier to do like this since we have a curve. And I'm going to start in the middle and work my way to one end, and then I'll start in the middle and work my way to the other end. So let's just sink this little needle right there and get a hold of the end. And now it's just a matter of going down, making little stitches. You will find that it works best to have a hard surface under you. You can have a lap board in your lap or work at a table, and it's just as easy to do as sewing other hexagons together. And there you have it. Now I'm going to show you how I like to machine stitch these curved hexagons together. Since I'm using water-soluble paper, I don't need to worry about sewing through the paper because the paper does not have to be removed later. I'm using my Bernina. I have a Bernina 750 QE, which I just adore. What I'm going to do is change this stitch. I'm going to change it to number, let's see, 1352. And that makes a nice little ladder stitch that will hook together those two sides of the curve very nicely and evenly. Let's get to stitching. First I'm going to pull these edges close together and make sure I have it aligned properly. And I like to use a little piece of tape to hold it together. Let me get that just right. I'm not going to sew over the tape. I'll remove it before I get to that spot, but this will help me as I get started. Make sure you have the right foot in your machine for this stitch, and I am going to let the needle come down, making sure it is between the two colors. And I am just going to go ahead and start, and just make sure you see that the presser foot has a line in the very center of it. I try to center that line right along the gap between the two different fabrics. But as I'm sewing, I'm also pushing these two pieces together to make sure that there is no space in between. Now every once in a while, every couple of stitches, I raise my presser foot and pivot. My Bernina has a nice knee control, so I can do that without even taking my hands off of my work. And you see how quickly this goes. Let's pivot again. When I'm going around the curve, I usually pivot about every couple of stitches. And you'll notice I'm using a dark gray thread here. You could use a thread that matches either one of your fabrics, or you could use a thread that just sort of disappears. At the end, I'll make some thread recommendations for you. A lot of people like to sew these by hand because they say they don't want their stitches to show, but my philosophy is if your stitches look as good as these, then why not have them show? we all have these machines with fancy stitches on them and we never use them. So this is a great chance to try a fancy stitch on your machine. Now I'm going to stop here and I'm going to get this this tape out of the way because I don't want to stitch through that. And now let's keep on going. You're going to get where you can do this very quickly. I like to sit in my comfy chair with a dog in my lap and do all my cutting and basting, and then I can come up to my sewing room and quickly stitch these together. And we're almost there. Just a few more stitches and we'll be at the end. I do like to do a little tacking stitch at the end, and then I just hit the cut button. And there you have it. Aren't those stitches beautiful? For doing my machine stitching, I love to use Aurifil thread. I have a big case of it in all kinds of colors, so I always have a color to pick from if I want to match it. But like I say, a lot of times I like to use a contrasting thread when doing this because the stitches look so good. Another thread that is also recommended for this process is Wonderfil Invisifil thread. This thread almost disappears, so if you want to sew by machine and you really don't want those stitches to stand out so much, this would be a good thread to try in your machine. And you can also use this by hand for hand stitching too. I hope you've seen how easy this is to sew these curves together. You can do it by hand, you can do it by machine, either way works. And also, I didn't mention this before, but I sew finished hexies together on my machine the same way with the same stitch. Quite easy. You'll notice the little tabs hanging out no matter how you sew them together. Don't worry about those. Those are going to tuck under the hexie that you stitch right beside it. Thanks so much for joining me.